I have a Lord of the Rings pop quiz for you. Is Tolkien's masterpiece The Lord of the Rings one book, three books, or six books? Go ahead and leave your answers in the comments below. I'll give you a second. Are you back? If you answered D, all of the above, then you are correct. Alright, I can see I've lost some of you, so grab your seats, grab your drinks, settle in. The old tavern keeps gonna tell you a tale. First and foremost, it's important to understand how J.R. actually pictured these books in his own mind. Every book published by J.R.R. Tolkien was meant to be a representation of a book in Middle-earth. That is to say, it is a book that Tolkien himself found, translated, and then put into the language of our world that really existed in Middle-earth. And in Middle-earth, there are essentially two books. We have the book There and Back Again, and that is the tale of Bilbo's trip to the Lonely Mountain and then back to his home in the Shire, the tale we know as The Hobbit. And this was written by Bilbo over his life between his 50s and his 100s. Now, the second book is considered to be one of the most important books in the entire history of Middle-earth, and is also one of the most relied upon and referenced historical records in Middle-earth itself. And it is called The Red Book of Westmarch. Now, this book was started by Bilbo Baggins, but was then later finished by Frodo Baggins before he departed to the Undying Lands, and then would further be finished and added to by Samwise Gamgee and Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took. That's Merry and Pippin. Now, the Red Book is the in-universe name for the Lord of the Rings. The book we know as Lord of the Rings in Middle-earth is called the Red Book. Stay with me. And that book is broken up into 6 different books that chronicle the different legs of the journey of the ring bearer and his companions. Book 1 is aptly called The Ring Sets Out, or The First Journey, and it covers Frodo's flight from the Shire all the way up until when he crosses the fjord just before getting to Rivendell. This book was partially written by Bilbo based on the accounts Frodo gave him in Rivendell after he made it there. Book 2 begins in Rivendell at the forming of the Fellowship and ends with the splitting of the Fellowship just after they leave Loch Lorraine. And this one was called The Journey of the Nine, or The Ring Goes South. And from this book onward, it's presumed that it was primarily written by Frodo. Book 3 begins with the death of Boromir and ends with the fall of Isengard, and is fittingly called The Treason of Isengard. Presumably this was recorded from accounts given by Aragorn, Merry, and Pippin. And then Book 4 takes us along the journey of Sam and Frodo and ends with them in the lair of Shelob the Spider, called The Journey of the Ringbearers, or The Ring Goes East. Book 5 covers the battles of the events of Rohan and Gondor, and the start of the conflict at the Black Gate, and is called The War of the Ring. And finally, Book 6 covers the destruction of the ring, the winning of the war, and then all of the aftermath therein, called The End of the Third Age, or The Return of the King, which had its conclusion written by Sam in the Shire, and annotated by Merry and Pippin, who later became Lords of Buckland. These 6 books would make up the Red Book of Westmarch, and it would be kept and closely guarded by Samwise Gamgee until his death. And there is a second copy that is carried by Merry and Pippin to be gifted to Elisar, that's Aragorn's king name, as well as Faramir in Gondor. And here it would become annotated by both human and elvish scholars. And there it would be a national treasure and the primary document used to reference and record the war around the Rings of Power, as well as the beginning of the Fourth Age of Middle-earth, often called the Age of Men. And Merry and Pippin would actually stay quite close to Aragorn. So much so that when they retire from their positions in Buckland, they would actually be buried in places of honor, the places where kings and royalty and nobility are buried in Gondor. And it was later said that they were laid to rest beside the bed of the great king, supposedly buried where later Aragorn too. Many years later, Aragorn would live some 110 years longer than them. Now, how does all this translate to the real world? Well, you see, Tolkien intended this whole book to be published as one singular great volume of more than 1,000 pages. The Lord of the Ring, the Tale of Sauron, and of course the Chronicle of his defeat. The 6 internal books published as one great volume. However, because the original version was over 1,000 pages with tons of extra content, lineages and maps and language maps and all of these things in the back, printers at the time couldn't really handle books this size. Not only was it difficult to print books of this size in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, but also because of World War II, there was a paper shortage. Tolkien was always adamant that the book should be published in its entirety as a singular volume. But his publishers more or less said it either never gets published or you have to compromise on this. Now, the publishers wanted to publish it as 6 independent volumes, but also because of the cost of printing and the paper shortages, that would have been a huge risk on the printer's part. So eventually they settled on the 3 volumes that we know today. The first 2 books making up the Fellowship of the Ring, the next 2 books making up the Two Towers, and the last 2 books of the Chronicle making up what we know today as the Return of the King. And those 3 books would be published over a course of about 18 months to gauge whether or not they would actually perform well in the market. And in the real world, the 6 books never had an official name. Tolkien only numbered them, book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you see, The Lord of the Rings is 1 book with 6 internal books that was published originally as 3 books with 2 books per volume. So it is all at the same time 1 book, 3 books, and 6 books. Isn't that fascinating?